Looks good. Ready to go.
It's on the clock. Unfortunately, for me, the C pen is on all BMX bikes, which is I'm so sad, so mad. Why, Gordon? Why? Why? Oh, it's gonna be a fun race either way. Got a couple of people that I've raced with in the past, but small pen. Single file. Yep, that's exactly how the pace started, and we ultimately were going fast enough to where everybody started kind of falling in line. Now, as the group started getting back together, we get close to round this corner, and of course, there's always one person that wants to fly off the front, and that's what we see start to happen here. The rider in green doing 4.3, 4.4 watts slowly starts to sneak away, and it looks like for a second there no one's going to respond. You got our Cunning, looks like, on the front pushing as well, and so as they start to go forward, I'm just kind of looking at what needs to be done in order to maintain the pace. But lo and behold, we're all still kind of there. Now, as we hit the climb, I personally like the direction of this climb. I hit it hard, wanted to make sure that because this is my first race as a pace group B rider, again, lost some weight, increased some power some, I wanted to really push the limits on this climb. Now, as we're getting ready to round the corner, one more time, you see the rider in green is off the front again, and again they start to push the pace up as we hit this little bit of an incline, 1%, nothing crazy, but ultimately it seemed like they were going to go on a break. Now they've got, not that far of a gap, a little over a second or so to the group, and so I decide I'm going to push up, because if he's going to break away, then I'm going to break away with him. And so I'm watching him get a little bit further into the distance. I launch my draft boost just so that way I can kind of prepare myself for this and start pushing on the watts as hard as I can. So you see I get up into the 600s and basically what I'm looking to do is leap away from the group. I'm looking to get away as quickly as possible, so that way once I catch up, I can just keep rolling. And I ended up rolling through him onto the climb itself and just decided, I'm going to keep pushing. Let's see how hard this person's willing to work. And so right now I have about a 2-second gap on the main part of the group. The next person up starts to push a little bit. You see the orange numbers for a second or so, but nothing crazy. And so I back down the power as I hit this flat. Now that I have about a 2-second gap, but one of the riders ends up coming up behind me. And so now at this point, I'm wondering if, how hard are they going to work? I'm still looking to push. My average at this point is right around 300 watts, just under. And so I know I've got plenty left in the tank. And so I want to see basically how far we can go with this. I would absolutely love a breakaway style finish on a race like this, especially with, it's in the category that I'm already in when it comes to Zwift racing score, but I'm definitely averaging a higher amount of power, so I don't have to draft as much. And that's kind of what I wanted to establish, is how much do I need the help of the group in order to just keep pushing the pace. So I end up pushing off the front, and at this point I'm looking at, I'm going to go as long as I can. And so this being the start of the third official lap, I'm looking at, can I go all the way? Can I continue to increase this gap that we're at? Right now we're at 2 seconds, but the group behind us is holding pretty strong. Like, they're not letting us get that far away. And so that's, my biggest concern right now is me and Lamb are pushing, but we're not really getting away. And little by little, even though the group is 3 seconds back, you can see their names at the bottom of the screen, which means they're not far enough away for us to make a huge difference. It could seem like we're kind of wasting watts here. You can see Lamb launch his power up, which ultimately helps him stay in the draft, stay behind me. And again, I'm just pushing as best I can to stay in that, distance and ultimately gain a little bit more of an advantage, bring in the gap out to 4 seconds. And so at this point, I'm thinking like, all right, maybe they're backing off, maybe they're not pushing as hard. Me and Lamb are doing 4.5 watts per kilogram, somewhere in that vicinity. And I think like, all right, we're hitting the climb. If I push as hard as I can on the climb once again, bring my power up, then maybe we'll be able to get away here. This is going to be the best place for us to really establish a breakaway. Now we're about 5-6 seconds out. You see a couple orange numbers pop up. I'm thinking that people are looking at this and thinking like, all right, maybe this might actually go if we don't push the pace. So that's why you see the orange numbers, someone getting up to 11 watts per kilogram going up that climb. That is pushing hard, absolutely pushing hard. And so you see the gap is starting to come back down by the end of this third lap, and that's kind of where it ends up for us. We didn't get away as far as I thought we did. Initially when I recorded this race, and while I was racing, I was like, man, we had like two laps that we were away, but ultimately it was only a single lap that we were able to stay away, single full lap, which is still good. On a race like this, it's a lot of effort, and I was hoping I wasn't going to pay for that. But we'll get to that in a little bit. Now this is where I start to pay for those previous efforts as we start to come down from the climb. The group is starting to pull away ever so slightly. You see a couple orange numbers there off the front, and I'm thinking at this point, like, I cannot lose the back of this group. Like, we pushed hard up that climb, but I definitely don't want to fall back. And so I give a bit of a dig into the 210, 212 gear range and trying to basically hold on through these rollers. Now, in this direction, that first bump is probably the hardest because it's, I think, the steepest in terms of this direction. And then after that, it's basically you're descending, so it's a little bit easier to maintain your pace. But at the same time, you can't just roll through it. You can't just not pedal and get through it. And so you got to basically maintain your tempo as you roll over those hills. And as you can see, that ended up paying off for me because I was able to not only get back to the front of the group, but also get onto the front of the group, so that way I can hold on. Because that's, at this point, that's where I'm focused at, is making sure I make it to the end, because I don't want to pay for my earlier efforts by getting dropped altogether. And so here I go once again off the back of the group. Now, at this point, I'm trying to get as much fluids in me as possible. You can see my shirt is changing colors quickly. And as I drink, I start to fall back ever so slightly, get a couple meters off the back. And now the group is really starting to move forward as we hit this climb. Now, this is a bad spot for me to have, missed out on, staying with the group. So I, just basically repeating these efforts, going all the way back up, trying to hold the line, so to speak, so that way I don't get dropped. And now I am a handful of seconds off the back of this group, and they appear to be quickly pulling away. And that for me was a big concern, because I did not want them to get too far. So I just kept the pace up, pushed as hard as I could, really basically, doing almost repeated sprint efforts back to back in order to, stay as close as I can to this group without falling too far behind. As you can see, I didn't really let them get too far out for this group, but there's a group ahead of us that is about 4 seconds away, and I knew that was going to be an issue. I knew if this group settled down and didn't try to push, then now, us being split into two different groups meant that if I didn't bridge that gap myself, there's a chance that these guys won't do it either. And that's, from all the races that I've seen, there's always a scenario where you end up with a gap, could be a handful of seconds, could be, 10 seconds or more. And there's always people that want to initiate a chase and really do their best to catch up. And if you can work together, great, then it becomes a lot easier in order to initiate that chase. But in scenarios like this, where there's not that many riders already, now we're talking about a scenario where if you don't do the work, the other people most likely aren't going to do it. And so I'm holding on to my draft at this point because I know if I can get myself within range to catch them, then I can use the draft to help kind of propel me back up. And so right now I'm about 4 seconds away from them, but slowly starting to catch up. I see the seconds ticking down as I hit this climb. Obviously they're not working as hard as they could to stay away, and so I just stayed on the front, bringing my average watts up, and ultimately start to secure myself in a comfortable spot where I know I'm catching back up to them, and ultimately know that I will latch onto their wheels. Alright, so here we go at the last lap. Now, at this point, I am exhausted. My shirt's changed colors, my legs are hurting, my average watts are almost 300 watts, which is higher than almost any race I've done recently. And so at this point, I'm thinking, I've got to do my best to stay with the group. I know as soon as we hit the KOM, it is going to be an unruly pace, because everybody at this point wants to break away. Now, on this course, being able to break away on that KOM is not a difficult thing to do. It's steep enough to where if people aren't paying attention, they start to lose, you can start to lose them around the corner. And I've done this before in a ladder match where, I basically started sprinting before the KOM in order to try and hide behind the corners. As well as, and at that race we had the ghost power up, so I used my ghost to try and disappear. And as you'll see, there's enough turns to where if you get around the corner where people don't see you, you're gone. You just got to have the power to basically finish that move. But as we approach the climb, everybody's still together, nobody's pushing hard just yet. And so as we hit the start of the climb, you see my pace come up significantly. I end up hitting about 700 watts. And really just trying to hold and push as hard as I absolutely can, bringing it up all the way up over the top, and just keep it pushing. You see Lamb behind me holding steady, and at this point I know, I launched my draft boost because I know that I'm not going to be able to get that far away from them, because everybody right now is still together. The whole group has just kept their foundation and really ready to battle this out. Now, as we hit this approach, I'm slowing down to try and ease off a little bit, save my legs. Again, my legs are hurting at this point. And as you see, we start the rollers, and I end up basically getting caught in a little bit of a gap. Not that far, but just enough to be annoying, because I really don't want to have any sort of gap like this. Now, you see there's, one rider up front that's way, way up there. And so I start digging in deeper, trying to get out of the saddle as fast as I can, so that way I can launch my sprint and get as close to the front as possible. Now the rider in front just disappeared. They went up, they took it all the way to the line, and that's exactly what they needed to do. Ultimately I end up crossing the line in 4th place, and I think that's because 2 riders ended up getting kicked out, because I'm pretty certain I crossed the line in 6th place, not in 4th. And so there you go. That was, again, for me, probably one of the hardest races I've done in a while, primarily because my average watts were a lot higher than they normally are. Generally for races like this, my average watts are in the 270s, 260s. So I didn't expect at all to be in the 290s.
Racing tonight.